Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Abe with MysticGenMara.com, a small town mystic from the middle of Idaho. And today I would like to do a simple book review on kind of a beginner's guide. There's been a few of these that I've talked about, and the big thing that reason I talk about these in particular is when you set a healthy foundation, it allows you to move so much further than what you originally thought. We'll get into other stuff later on, but for now we're still kind of working through some of the ins and outs, especially with the book section. And this one is one that was written by a Gardenian line witch. I believe he was actually trained by Gerald Gardner, or at least met Gerald Gardner before he passed. And that is Raymond Buckland, who recently just passed away as well in the last 10 years or so. I can't remember the exact date, sorry. But it's called Wicca for One, The Path of Solitary Witchcraft. And he wrote this one, and he kind of started, him and Scott Cunningham started a little bit of a trend with solitary stuff, because not everyone has access to a coven. Not everyone has access to a group that allows them to express and practice a religion alternative to Christianity in a peaceful way. So these particular books I found very helpful, especially when I was starting out. I've also talked about a book by Ellen Dugan, and it's already in my video playlist for book reviews. You can check that one out. That one is more of a reference material book, but it does give you some simple pathworking spells, some different viewpoints of how to work with different quarters based upon your particular spiritual alignment, whether it's Greek, Asian, Hindu, even a lot of Christian theologies in there as well. It just gives you a lot more of a broad range when it comes to metaphysics and Wicca. This particular book, though, I really appreciate how he writes, and there's a few of these authors that I am just a little bit obsessed with because of their writing style. Raymond Buckland is one that for me is like that. I've talked about his other book on here, the Book of Spirit Communication. Big red book, amazing for what is involved in it. It's very intense, going through the history of different ways of communicating through table tapping and all the rest of it. This one is a little less extreme, but it's more about how to tap into nature itself and how to work within the cycles of nature and finding that balance, which is so, in my opinion, so important. Chapter 1 is kind of entertaining, from Endor to Endora and beyond. So we're talking like Star Wars, Bewitched, and the whole clan here. And it's kind of funny because when he talks about Endor, it's like the book of the Witch of Endor as well. So there's like this multiple layering going on. But the Witch of Endor was actually a medium, if we're going to be really technical in our terminology here, a summoner of spirits. So witch doesn't quite apply, but that's been demeaned over the years for just on that basis. There's several different terms in here he actually defines. According to Isaac Bonowitz, Witchcraft: A Concise Guide, we shall define a classic witch as follows: a person, usually an older female, who is adept in the use of herbs, roots, and barks for the purpose of healing and harming. This was what some of the old beliefs were, and if you've checked out some of my live streams, which I would like to get back to, it's just, life is interesting right now. Anyway, the basic principle is passive and active in magic, and they can use them for good and ill as the witch chooses. So you go through this basis of what does it mean to be a witch in this first entire section, the different references through history, through Greek myths and lore, and then through the Romans, up through the modern day philosophies. And then he goes into probably a lot of the stuff that I've already talked about as far as whence came the covens. And this is the second chapter, and it's talking about how a lot of these groups through history have moved towards, like Gerald Gardner, coming into a more public state with the term of being a witch or being Wiccan, or whichever term you choose to place above your name. And there's a lot of people, and to a certain extent I will agree with this, that think that the only way to be a practicing witch is to be initiated through a coven practice, and you can still practice on your own, but you need the coven to, train, guide, morals, ethics, that kind of stuff. And the reason I say for the most part, support this, when you start doing a lot of this work, and they talk about this a little bit in here as well, it gets really emotionally intense. And in a lot of ways, being in a community of people who work together allows you to be able to bounce ideas off of other people, find out different experiences. Thanks to the internet, that's way easier now than it used to be. But it's the intensity of going through stuff. Wicca and witchcraft and metaphysics, occult, most of it, it's not just about learning magic and spells. It's about developing yourself, conquering those shadows that you don't want to deal with, bringing them back into alignment, understanding more about who lives in the meat suit here, but also connecting you to God Source Divine. Well, when you do that, it can be a little bit challenging, and that's why I do highly recommend, if you can find a ethical, moral coven, work with the coven. And if you're not in a situation where a coven is an option, find an online or a spiritual community in your valley that doesn't like to use the term coven. That's fine too, because it's best to have the support when you need it. There have been times where I didn't have that support, and trust me, you need it during those times probably more than not. And they also can keep your feet on the ground. Then we get into religion or practice, coven or solitary. Wicca in modern thought is the religion. Witchcraft is the magic behind it. There are Wiccans today who practice only the religion part and will never cast a spell. That's fine. They don't have to. There's other people who only practice the magic aspect of witchcraft and have nothing to do with the religion. Again, fine, whatever. But he's talking about what are the two differences between religion and the occult, the magic parts of it, and then what is the benefits or of each of the sides, whether in a coven or solitary. He breaks it down really well. Then we go into, because he was trained through a coven, through the Gardenian line, there are basic beliefs to be able to call yourself our Gardenian witch. There are very set bases that you can check. You can say, I was inspired by Gardenian, and go do your own thing, which a lot of people have done. It's when covens hive off, that's fine. But there is a baseline belief, and that's what chapter 4 is about. And there is a poem in here that Raymond wrote as an invocation or an evocation of the Lord, and I'll just read the first sentence here. Behold, I am he who is at the beginning and the end of time. I am the heat of the sun and the coolness of the breeze. This is his way of saying this is who the Lord is. It is not, Zeus sitting up on a cloud strumming a harp or whatever the modern interpretations are. It's so much more than that. And that's the beauty of this practice, is you get into the depths of what does it actually mean to be in communion with God Source Divine? What does it mean to connect with the divine feminine through the face of the goddess or the lady? These are real things for people who practice alternative religions. It's not just, I reach for you. It's literally, I'm communing with you right now. And this is where the beliefs of a practicing Wiccan or witch, especially the ones who come from those lines, Alexandrian or Gardenian, they're a different breed when it comes to how they show up in the world. But he talks about how the gods and goddesses have inspired. For example, many have been brought up in a Christian world. Probably most people start there somewhere. With the concept of one male deity. If you stop to consider the life in our world, you see that everything is a duality, male and female, and they are necessary for life. So why are we saying there's only one? And this is the same with humans, animals, birds, fish, plants, trees. Why would that not be so with the gods? It makes far more sense to believe in a god and a goddess, even if you were a solitary practitioner, than it would be to say only the god, only the goddess. Because there are certain groups out there, there's like an entire branch of Dianic Wicca and witchcraft that only worships the goddess. That's fine. Most of them will acknowledge that there's a male side to it, but that's their practice. And like I said, that's fine. And when you start to go through the solitary practices, I like, especially with these kind of books, I love to underline the important stuff to me. Oops. And that one in particular is, everyone is his or her own priest or priestess, fully able to connect with the deity in a personal, intimate fashion. And the reason that I marked that during the time when I was reading this originally and going through a lot of the practices, I was still not sure if it was okay to reach out and commune with a god by myself. Like, do I need to be at church? Do I need to be in a certain spot? How does this work? Now I know those things are great to get you started, but you really don't need them overall. They're very beneficial for the support, but again, when you're in a need for connecting, you can do it sitting at home. You can do it driving down the road. Careful doing that. But you can do it, connect with the divine anywhere. He goes through and describes how we honor the earth as well as the god and goddess, because, Gaia is where we live. He goes through a section on reincarnation, the basics of magic, and I mean basics as in there's 3 paragraphs about it. The second section is when we get into the actual practice of a solitary. Goes through the tools that you will need in chapter 5, your athame, your wand, your white-handled knife or boline, which boline and white-handled knife, depending on which group you're in, can be 2 different things or the same. There is the burin, where you generally this one is like a pin you mark your candles with. Then you have your staff. If you loved The Lord of the Rings, or if you've ever read any of the Dragonlance books, there's magical staffs are so important to all the wizards. A lot of the times you can use a staff in place of the wand if you've got the space for it. So that's where those come in. And honestly, I don't know many witches or Wiccans or practitioners who don't have a wand somewhere close to them at all times. Just kind of a thing that goes with the trade. There is the cords, which is a really big thing in certain groups. The besom broom, which is a ceremonial broom. It's not the broom you use to clean your house. There are some of them that I have seen, I haven't purchased one yet, that are made with like cinnamon as part of the branches. So when you sweep, you're actually bringing in good luck and prosperity. They smell so amazing. A lot of his stuff is very traditional. So you have a bell, you have your goblet, you have a censer, which is where you burn your incense, and then specific clothing only for the ritual. You don't have to go that elaborate, but it does take you out of the everyday when you go through a ceremonial cleansing and you put on sacred clothing for that purpose. It changes a subconscious switch in your brain, putting you more in the zone to, this is what we're doing, this is where we're at. Some people love to use jewelry. That's up to you. I mean, I'm usually wearing something like this. I've got crystals. Usually I've got them either wearing them or in pockets somewhere. Then we go through what it means to have a book of shadows. Again, he's a traditionalist, so he would prefer your first one or your main one to be handmade. That's cool if you can do it. If not, you can literally buy a three whatever journal, like the notebook 5 stars or whatever. I've used that primarily for years, so you pick what you need. And then they talk about anointing oils. He goes through a section on how to consecrate your tools and your temple, and what basic designs for altars. These are so fun because, like in this one, you've got your either a candle or a statue of a god figure and a goddess figure. You have an altar candle, which is nothing special. It's literally just to light other things off of. You have your goblet, your censer, a libation dish if you're doing offerings, oil, salt, and water, part of your opening and closing ceremonies, your cord, the wand, and your bell. And the bell is generally used to bring in positive energy and repel the negative. So he talks about building the cones of power and how it's not really just a dome cone, it's actually a sphere, which means it goes underneath you as well as above you. Then he breaks down some basics of a standard ritual, we'll call it that. We have the opening of the circle or erecting the temple. Then we move into closing the circle, how to move in and out of a consecrated space. You don't just step across those lines. When you build a circle, and this is something he talks about, you are separating the mundane world from the spiritual. Spiritual's inside, mundane outside. So you're not just stepping across the line. Respectfully, there should be a door so that you are being respectful of whatever energies you're working with, saying, I forgot something, I need to step out. So you open a pathway, step out, do what you need to do, come back in the same location, close the pathway. Now, this applies for Wicca and witchcraft. If you are working ceremonial, that circle shouldn't be left once you get started, period. So, then it is talking about ways of sacred dance, music, song, which is amazing to trigger some of these higher energies. Then we get into the initiation, which is kind of a first step for most people. He talks about basic sabbats, which are your full moon rituals or your new moon rituals, the cakes and wine, why we do that, how it works, all that fun jazz. Whether you want to work on the dark moon, the new moon, the full moon, those are all times you can do. It's all up to you. This is one of the reasons that I've tote this book with me a lot, is this section right here. Whoops, wrong page. This section right here, rites of passage. Usually when a solitary, you don't have a lot of options to do these things, but there are very important rites of passage in our lives. Not everyone goes about. Like the Catholic Church and a lot of other churches will do christenings or baby blessings. In Wicca, they call it a Wiccaning. But the way they look at hand fasting, which is a little different than marriage, it's actually a much more, to me, it's more meaningful. I've read through multiple hand fasting rituals, both for straight or homosexual love. They are so much more, to me, intimate, and it's more about the bonding between two people and how that is an agreement with God Source Divine in physical form. The traditional marriage ceremony is beautiful in its way as well, but when you read through a hand fasting one, I don't know, there's something different about it. It's really cool. Then we go into crossing over, which is the more pagan aspect of a funeral rite. Then they break down the Wheel of the Year with all the sabbats, which I talk about those a lot on here, so we'll skip through this section. But will you get into like magical hours? There's charts about all of this, how to do day hours versus night hours. What do the hours of the day mean? It's not the same as it's 6 a.m. It is the hour of the sun. It is the hour of Venus. Changes a whole different way of looking at it. And they're not 60-minute hours, by the way. We also have releasing power after a ritual. It's not just, okay, we're done, we're going to close the circle and walk away. If you want poltergeist, you can do that. There's ways to ground the energy so you're not toting it around for days afterwards. It's not healthy. Then we get into very specific aspects of magic, candles and colors and days of the week and different altar settings, how to use. And this book is very basic. It's not doing things complicated. It's talking about how to use your cord in magic. It's how to use poppets, basic love spells. Of course, love spells are in here. There's a little bit of amorous magic as well. What the difference between a talisman and an amulet is. Magical squares, which is generally seen as more of a ceremonial thing, but Gerald Gardner and Alex Sanders had a background in ceremonial magic, so it kind of fits with what they're doing. And those are not requirements by any stretch. The beauty of Wicca and witchcraft in the way that Gerald Gardner and Raymond Buckland and even Alex Sanders did is, here is the template. Where you take it from here is up to you. But if you're going to follow our line, this is basically how we work. And honestly, the guidelines and a lot of the things, the steps to take are ways to develop the relationship between you and the divine. They're also there as a way to guide you in the path of an ethical or moral, usually both, way of practicing. There are people who are okay with doing a little more negative stuff, but for the most part, we should be working to get rid of that out of our system and work to enlighten and brighten our world in a positive way. You're going to have negativity. It's going to be in the world. But why would you, on a path of spiritual development and enlightenment, actively promote the other side? So, he even talks a little bit about the runes, and there's the tarots in here, of course. How to use a pendulum, how to study herbs for healing versus magic, which there is a huge difference. There's some things that are pretty similar, but it's not like everything. And then how to develop your practice going forward. Final Thoughts is an interesting chapter. Everything needs to be considered, and of course all this should have been considered before you start your spells. This is with everything. Even with everything being covered, sometimes spells don't work. That's because it's not in your soul contract to make that particular movement occur. And that's something that is a little hard to swallow when you first start out on the path, is like, well, magics and witchcraft are supposed to change my life. No, they're supposed to help you understand yourself better. That's a different story. You cannot argue with people if you're trying to convince them that, no, I'm doing this for all the good benefit in the world, but they look at witch and they are like, burn it at the stake. You can't convince those people. And that's why in a lot of the older covens and practices, you took vows of silence. You didn't talk about it. No one knew if you were. And when you're working a solitary path, sometimes that's beneficial. Sometimes it's best not to announce at your work that I have now taken this pathway, because they're going to look at you and be like, huh? But there in the back, there is a glossary of terms, herbs, some different alphabets, the Theban, the passing the river, the can't even say that word, angelic and runic alphabets, which are kind of fun. Overall, if you're looking for kind of a good starter area, one that has a very stable environment where it comes down from, and this is a really good introduction to the Gardenian line and what is basics of the practice. Again, you can take this as far as you want to, and even Raymond talks about it in this book. So there'll be a link in the description. You can check out the book. If you've read it before, I would love to hear your experiences with it. Just see what other ideas are out there. This one is one, like I said, it's a lot of foundational stuff I'm doing right now, because these are how I ended up where I'm at, and I'm an eclectic group of everything. There's a lot that I deal with. But with Wicca in particular, he is another one of those ones that inspired me to go further, make it more personal, and that's what my hope is. If you have not read it, if you choose to check it out, I really hope that it helps along your path, maybe answer some of the questions that people haven't fully fleshed out for you yet. With that, I will let you guys go. All those YouTube-y things, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.